Hello aviators, how are you today? My name is Magnar Nordahl. Some time ago, a viewer asked me to tell about how it was to fly in Taiwan. I spent 15 months there, and before I start to tell about my flying experience, I just want to recall the history of Taiwan. Taiwan is officially the Republic of China, while China mainland is People's Republic of China. After the Second World War, there was a civil war in China, and the communists won. They are still in power. And the former government, led by Chiang Kai-shek, moved to Taiwan in 1949. There's a dispute between China and Taiwan because both of them claim the territory of the other. Initially, Taiwan was a member of United Nations, while mainland China was not. This changed in 1971 due to political factors and also economical factors. And UN decided that will only recognize PRC as the representative of China. Very few UN members recognize Taiwan as a nation today, but many nations maintain strong unofficial ties. Because Taiwan is not member of UN, they are not member of ICAO. Therefore, Taiwan is the only country in the world that are not issuing ICAO licenses. There's a bit confusion about licensing. For example, I have an EASA license, and here it's written, the license complies with the ICAO standards, which means this is an ICAO license. Even people say you either have an ICAO license, EASA, or FAA license. But all of those licenses are based on ICAO recommendations. Taiwan is the only one not issued as an ICAO license, even they follow ICAO's recommendations more than most member nations. That's a paradox. And if you look at the so-called ICAO license, here I have a license from Fiji, they don't even mention ICAO at all in the license. It's written, this document is issued in accordance with the Civil Aviation Act 1976. So ICAO is not mentioned, but they still call it an ICAO license. But okay, I digress. Let's continue. I was hired by TransAsia Airways, and this company was quite old. It was founded in 1951 as Kaohsiung Airlines. It was the first private airline in Taiwan, and they had the first ATR 42 from 1988 and the first ATR 72 in 1990, which means they were early customers of ATR aircraft. They also acquired Airbus 320, 321, and 330. The company expanded rapidly in the 2000s, and they were listed on the Taiwan Stock Exchange in 2011. In 2014, they launched budget airline V-Air, and strangely enough, they competed against the mother company on some routes. TransAsia has, or shall I say, TransAsia had a sad story when it comes to the ATR. They had 4 fatal accidents. The first was in January 1995. This was an empty flight with 4 crew members, and they flew into high terrain near Taipei. And the accident report blamed the crew for loss of situational awareness. In December 2002, loss of control killed both crew members on a cargo flight from Taiwan to Macau. And again, the crew members were blamed for losing control because they didn't follow procedure for icing. The company survived this. But then in July 2014, there was a fatal accident on approach to Maogong, where the crew descended below instrument approach minima. In fact, the captain asked for 100 feet down, 100 feet down, 100 feet down, below minima. They didn't see anything. And then they disconnected autopilot, and both pilots were looking out, looking for the runway. They hit trees and buildings, and 48 were killed, 11 survived. Then in February 2015, the aircraft experienced an uncommanded auto-failure after takeoff. And despite the information glared to them on the procedure screen, engine 2 out, there was no communication between the pilots, and they ended up shutting down engine number 1, which meant they have no power at all. It took 1 minute for them to discover the mistake, and then it was too late to try to restart engine. And this accident killed 43 people. There were 14 survivors. And you may remember this picture from a dash cam showing the aircraft stalling, hitting a taxi and a bridge before plunging into a river. And that image killed the company. So 2 accidents within 7 months, that's really, really bad. And the reason for both were lack of operational standard. Each captain made the things in their own way, and they did not respect the standard operating procedures at all, which meant each co-pilot had to adjust to each captain. And during simulator training and checking, the captains were not corrected for not following the procedures. So it started with the company culture, followed up by the captains not adhering to the procedures. No actions were taken after the first of those 2 accidents, but they grounded the fleet after the second accident because they happened only 7 months apart. Now, the captains had to go through an evaluation. First, an interview with I think it was the chief pilot of a rival company, UniAir. And some older captains refused to be interviewed by a person who was younger than them. This is about loss of faith. So they were given an early retirement. The remaining captains undertook an evaluation in a simulator in Bangkok, and some of the captains, they failed. And they were also given retirement. To replace them, the company hired 5 expat captains. I was one of them, and we came from 5 different countries, but we were all in a way synchronized because we follow the ATR's Flight Crew Training Manual, which most companies follow 95%. So it was easy to us to get adapted to this TransAsia. But for TransAsia's captains, it was hard because they introduced the Flight Crew Training Manual after the second accident. So for an old captain, like my age, it's really hard to adapt to a new procedure. The co-pilots were young, they adapted quickly. And I was hired to fly the 72-500. They have both the 500 and 600 in the fleet. And shortly after our arrival, the company decided to ground the 72-500s. So I was sent to Singapore for a so-called Delta course on the 600. That took 1 week. Also, the process to get hired included a medical check, which took 2 days. One of the days was a psychological evaluation where they even scanned my brain. Never experienced that before. But okay, I passed. And then there was a written exam to get the Taiwanese license. We also underwent very good emergency training, which we did together with the cabin crew. And by the way, here is Sergey. We met a couple of days ago here in Dubai. Funny, it's a small world. There are many positive aspects with flying with TransAsia. I had great colleagues. And for example, if I one morning call in and say, I'm not fit to fly, They just say, have a good rest. No pressure whatsoever. I wish every company could do that. And first time I diverted to an alternate airport after a missed approach due to fog. I got a message, good job. That's really good. And also the destinations are quite interesting. But let me talk about Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, because I was based there. And it's called the Singapore of East Asia. It's safe. There are almost no traffic jams. They have bus and metro. The food is good. They have street food. But they have a tendency to put sugar in everything, even the bread, which I didn't like. I rented an apartment, 2 bedrooms, with a nice view. And my family stayed with me. My wife traveled back and forth to Bangkok because she had business there. And one of my daughters, she attended the university and studied Chinese language. So she stayed with me most of the time. I experienced 2 typhoons, a few light earthquakes you barely can feel, but the typhoons were really strong and you didn't want to go outside. But the country is well prepared for typhoons, and they spent one day cleaning up, and then everything was nice again. Taipei is known for until 2010, they had the tallest tower in the world, Taipei 101. They also had the fastest elevator. It used 37 seconds up to 91st floor, 390 meters up. The tower has a huge steel ball, what is called a tune mass damper. It moves opposite of movements of the building in typhoons and earthquakes, and reducing the movement by 40%. It's very heavy, 660 metric tons. We had other attractions, Maogong gondola, where you go up into the mountains near the city. And some of the gondolas has a glass floor. That's really nice. And you look down on tea plantations. And when you reach the top, you should absolutely go to one of the saloons serving tea, because it's really, really delicious, because it's made of fresh tea leaves. Not far away, we have Yeliu Geopark with some very interesting rock formations. This rock is called Cleopatra. All in all, a pleasant city to live in. When it comes to flying, I flew for TransAsia, and we flew in competition with Uni Air. They have ATR 72600. Mandarin, they operated Embraer 190. Today they fly ATR 72600 because they're more economical on short routes, which we have in Taiwan. Then we had Far Eastern Air Transport, and they flew old MD-80s. They later changed to ATA-76, but they ceased operations in 2019. At the airport, you will find posters of the cabin crew welcoming you. So this is TransAsia, Mandarin, Far Eastern, and Uni Air. I stayed in an apartment 5 minutes from the metro, and I took the metro all the way to a station at the terminal. Check-in 45 minutes before departure. That's really short, but we were within walking distance to the aircraft. This was first time I flew an ATR where the weight was not in kilograms but in pounds, so I had to adapt to the new numbers. I also noticed they used to fly very low. Even the longest routes, which could be about 300 nautical miles, they stayed at 10 or 11,000 feet. I didn't know why. So it's more efficient to fly higher, right? Because the fuel burn is less and your cruise speed is at the highest at level 160, more or less. And it's a small country. So on the way back from Kinmen, which is close to mainland China, you could see entire Taiwan on your screen. Taipei, Songshan was the base, and this airport is in the middle of the city. So commuting to work was super easy, as I mentioned. There could be some turbulence because of the high terrain around the airport. And in the winter, especially, there could be low clouds. And this image shows a situation that can be a bit difficult because you are in an open area, but there are lower clouds ahead on the sides, and they could suddenly close in and obstruct the view, right? Our second base was Kaohsiung. It's the second largest city in Taiwan. It's in the south, and the climate is very different from Taipei in the north, even there's a short distance between them. The winter especially were much warmer in Kaohsiung. And there are no direct flights between Taipei and Kaohsiung because they built a high-speed train which at top speed up to 300 kilometers per hour. And with one stop en route, it took 1.5 hours with the train. I also experienced there that I practiced to clear to land as number 2, which means either an aircraft taking off or landing ahead of you. So you better look out. Yeah. I also remember departing and heading east. Most departures were towards east, but our destination were opposite direction. And the departure took us over an industrial park and through some really nasty emissions from those factories. It smelled really bad, so we switched off the air condition as we flew through. Not far away, there is an Air Force museum, and I like historic aircraft. And I found some interesting aircraft, most of them built in the United States, but also some local built. This is an AIDC, meaning Airspace Industrial Development Corporation, model PL1B, Shaizhou, a primary trainer, and this was a licensed variant of the Prasmani PL1, powered by a 150 horsepower engine, and they built 58 of those. Then they had their own designs, ACH-1, Chongqing. This was a light attack aircraft variant of the TCH-1 trainer. The airframe is based on the T-28 Trojan, but instead of a big radial engine, they put in a turboprop engine, developing 1450 horsepower, and they built 52 of them. Then XA-3 Liumeng. This was a proposed attack version of the AT-3 advanced jet trainer. And they built 2 prototypes, and then they canceled the project in favor of other aircraft. Then they had a nice collection of MiG. We could call it the MiG Alley. MiG-15Bs, built in China as J2, flown to Taiwan by a pilot who defected in 1962. This is a MiG-17, J5 in China. The pilot defected in 1983. MiG-19, called F6 or J6. This was flown by a pilot who defected in 1987. Then they had a MiG-21, F-13 variant from Hungary. The story is a bit blurred, but it was confiscated by customs officers in 1990 and given to the museum. And finally, an Ilyushin Il-28 light bomber, flown in by a crew who defected in 1965. We proceed to another airport, Maogong, located on islands halfway between Taiwan and mainland. And in the winter, it's very windy. It can be 40 to 50 knots wind, thankfully, on the runway. But air traffic control used to tell us to descend very early on approach. So we flew at 2,000 feet or 1,500, I don't remember exactly. But because of the wind, a lot of salt was blown up into the air, and we landed with tons of salt on the windscreen. You see here, they started to clean the windscreen. Not easy to land with that. I also remember we had a pushback where we got this wind from the left, and The runway was wet, also the apron, and as they pushed us back, suddenly the nose wheel lost the grip and the nose weather went into the wind with the tow truck attached. That was not fun. Maogong is also a summer base for FKC-1 Xingqiu fighters, and they look a bit like F-16 on the nose section. They use the same avionics, but it has 2 engines. It was built when Taiwan was not allowed to buy F-20 or F-16s from the United States, but later that embargo was lifted. And then we have Kinmen. It's an island very close to mainland China. So on approach, we can see over to China, and it was very important for us to stay on the track. Absolute. There could be fog, so as I said earlier, sometimes you had to divert back to your alternate approach. Then we had Kaohsiung, a huge airport, long runway, very long taxi route because the terminal is far, far away from the runway. And what I remember here is the long, long taxi. And also one day in the control zone, we saw a powered paraglider flying next to us. And my first officer commented, "Oh, they know who he is. He's done that before." Of course, we reported to tower. Thankfully, no conflict, but it was not fun to see. And another day, we taxied towards Holding, and a man ran across the taxiway. Okay. Finally, we have Hualien at the east coast. This is an Air Force base, and they have hangars inside the mountain. Hualien is at the base of a very tall mountains, and because of a hill, there was a very long approach for the ILS. We came from north, from Taipei, had to fly a very long pattern to cross over the hill and onto the ILS. In good weather, we can fly an LDA approach into zero correction runway 21, either land there or make a visual pattern into 03. I remember one day we were told to expedite, so we flew, we cleared a circling and I cut it off visually. So I joined the last part of the circling procedure and landed. I noticed it was an F-16 on holding. And this was a demonstration flight by the F-16. They took off just as we taxied in. And we got this display over the head of us. And then a Mirage 2000, and then a FCK-1. And when they finished, we could depart. One thing about East Asia, China, also Taiwan, there is a punishment culture. So earlier, as I said, they had 2 accidents because nobody were accountable for what happened. And now it changed into a punishment culture. And this was feeling fair among the pilots, especially after one crew lined up without clearance. And the captain asked the co-pilot, "Are we clear to line up?" Co-pilot said yes, but in fact they were clear to taxi to holding. Captain asked again, and again the first officer said, "Yes, we are clear to line up." It would be very easy to ask the tower for confirmation, but they didn't, so they lined up, and traffic confiner had to go around. And the company fired both pilots, no pardon. And of course, every pilot had that fear hanging over them, that threat that if I do a mistake, I lose my job. And when you have that fear, what do you think happened? Your focus is on the wrong place, right? And one day I was asked to come to the office next morning at 9 o'clock. Okay, I went to the office and I was shown into a meeting room where head of training, chief pilot, head of flight operations, and several instructors were seated. And they asked me to sit down in front of them. I have absolutely no idea what this was about. And then they said 2 weeks ago I had not been stabilized on approach into Hualien airport. I was thinking, how come? And I asked, can you please specify exactly what happened? Because I have absolutely no idea. And I said I have been stabilized on 400 feet and had flown a visual approach into runway 03. And the criteria is you have to be stabilized at 500 feet or you go down, which I hadn't done. And then I understood, that was that day they had this fighter waiting on a holding. And to save time, we asked for an LD approach 21 for circling to land on 03. That will save time. And then the tower asked us, please expedite. And to save time, I headed straight for base and joined the circling there. And on a circling approach, the criteria is to be stabilized at 300 feet, which I was. And I said, but you didn't fly the circling, you didn't fly the downwind. And I said, correct, because I did a visual approach. And the definition for a visual approach, according to ICAO, is an approach by an IFR flight when either part or all of an instrument approach procedure is not completed and the approach is executed in visual reference to terrain. And I did not do the downwind part, I went straight for the base. Thankfully, they accepted that explanation, but if I didn't know this rule, it would have been consequences for me. I also made it clear that this was my responsibility, so if they would respond to anyone, it should be me, not my first officer. Well, that was how it was. But things didn't go well for the company because this image killed the company. They lost public trust. We carried very few passengers compared to the others. UniAir, also flying ATR, could have full flight. We may have 20 passengers. Even we sold the tickets as a lower price. It also affected the Airbus fleet, even they shouldn't be affected at all. But this was a public mistrust in the company as a whole. They shut down Air in October 2016, and the last flight I did was on 21st of November. Then we were told, you park your aircraft in Kaohsiung, which was our final destination for the day, you take the train back to Taipei. The day after, they announced they stopped operations. It wasn't a surprise for us, but for most people it was. But they said they have lost 10 million new Taiwan dollar. That's 316,000 US dollar per day. So I fully understand why they shut it down, but the main reason was the 2 accidents in 7 months. That killed the company. I was very, very lucky because 1 week earlier I had been given yes from Bangkok Airways in Thailand, and I will start working for them in January the next year. But that's another story. As always, thank you to all of the members of the channel who's supporting me, and to all other of you, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and happy landing.
50, 40, 30, 20,